then it turns into, well, you just happen to have been born in a country that is predominantly Muslim or predominantly Catholic or predominantly Protestant or predominantly Buddhist. And so it's still nothing of the sort of a consistency. Hey guys, welcome to the channel. I'm Don. I am doing a video that I haven't seen this, but the channel itself is devoted to philosophical insights into theology, science, atheism, whatever, anything that sort of touches on deeper or questionable subjects. Put it that way. That's what philosophy does anyway. Philosophy or philosophers sort of consider disparate arguments, a vast array of ideas, and they're just kind of fun to ponder. So the channel formerly was known as Thinking Theology, but I am changing it most likely to Trickle Down Philosophy, the name Trickle Down Philosophy. But in any case, this one is Top 10 Christians in Science on Science and Faith. Let's see what these folks come up with. I'm just curious to see where they go with it.
We are here to talk about big questions. Maybe the biggest question of all. Does God exist? I won't give you a proof tonight, but I hope I will give you some things to think about. Things that have led me from being an atheist to becoming a believer and a follower of Jesus.
Perhaps the most widespread fundamental assumption in the intellectual West today is that there is no reality beyond what natural science discovers, and that there is no authority or good higher than the freedom of the individual. Now, both science and individual freedom are good, but followers of Jesus, like me, have a different view. We believe that both the deepest reality and the highest moral meaning, or good, or authority, are to be found in loving relationship.
Why is nature regular? Why does it follow regular laws? Why can we understand them? And we're so used to these ideas today that we don't realize that they weren't actually that obvious to most people through most time. And the reason for that is that if you just live in the natural world, it doesn't seem to be always that regular. It seems to be capricious. It changes itself all the time. And so what you can show, I think quite decisively historically, is that these ideas, these metaphysical underpinnings of science, uniformity, regularity, intelligibility, have deep theological roots. Their roots go back to a long history of theological reflection on a God who is faithful and sustains the world, therefore, in a regular way.
But just simply the idea that the universe could be expanding, not sort of expanding into something, but just that the space-time metric changes and that there could be a beginning of time is just incredible. I mean, if you go back to before Einstein's work and you go to Newtonian world, there's basically a coordinate system. There's X, Y, and Z, and T, right? And these are just fixed, and things happen in this grid, and you describe physical processes and events by putting them in this grid. And the idea that the universe was changing is just completely ludicrous to many people. And then along comes Einstein, and now we realize that space-time not only can expand and contract, but through the work of Hubble, it actually is. The universe is expanding, and so if you play it back, there was a time when the universe was incredibly small and tiny. That to me is just mind-boggling, and it actually adds to my sort of confidence that the creation story has some merit.
Yeah, and I find that fascinating too. And I mean, it's a very good counterpoint in a sense that an atheist will make, or even some open-minded theists will make, to say that, all right, that it doesn't prove that they're the Jesus of the Bible or the New Testament or the Hebrew Bible or the Quran or whatever the various sacred texts are around the world, that's the right one. The belief in a creator, and this is my take as well anyway, that it is a possibility that a creator made all the stuff that we see. I have no way of disproving that. I can't say I absolutely know that for a truth, because I can't do that either. But the texts themselves, those aren't dispositive. But when we look at origins of things, that there's a form of logic that says I could see that this could be the product of a creator or a designer. Now, where is this creator? why did this creator make stuff? Where do we fit in it? Are we just basically the equivalent of what bacteria are to us? You know, the texts say otherwise, but the texts say some horrendous things too. You know, about the flood story, the God wiping out creation and all that. But I like the way these folks are presenting it. They're not pompous, and they are learned, obviously.
I certainly have colleagues who speak very much the way I used to speak. You know, like, how can you believe in something that you can't, prove mathematically or show in this way? And in fact, a friend of mine who's a mathematician used to say that to me. How can you believe in something that you can't prove? I only believe in things I can prove. And then one day he was reading a history book, and his friend, who happened to be a Christian, said, why are you reading that history book? You can't prove any of that. And he realized there's a lot of truth that has happened in the past that we can't prove today like you can a mathematical thing. And furthermore, of course, all of our science and our math rest upon axioms and things that we take at faith. So people who think that they can't deal with faith are really just deceiving themselves.
I believe that.
So what I'm fond of saying, and I'll say it again tonight, is I don't have the faith to be an atheist. To me, the universe does require an explanation. The philosopher's very ancient question of why is there something rather than nothing is still a valid question. And as many people, including physicist Paul Davies, have pointed out, the laws of physics themselves demand an explanation that stands somehow out of science. Whether that is a physical explanation or a spiritual explanation, nature is not self-explanatory. And ultimately, if I had to tell someone why I am a theist, it is because precisely I think that nature, as we see it, requires an explanation. And the more we know of the world from science, the more it begs that explanation.
I start by saying there is a God who created the universe, and he's not an impersonal God. He has declared himself as a loving God who seeks a relationship with us and also gives us free will to choose him or not. And our purpose then is found in being in relationship with him.
The order and structure of the natural laws, to me, suggests a God who ordained and conceived those laws. The astonishing complexity of living things, to me, suggests an architect who cares about those things. The fact that there is something rather than nothing suggests the existence of a creator of that something.
All right. Now, I can understand the part of the logic there, but once you get into the part that there's a creator who cares about these things, that's where, to me, it gets very dicey. Because there's a ton of evidence that if the creator does care about what takes place in human events, it's not a very deep caring or a deep involvement. Certainly, if you could create all these things that we see, it's possible for some other means of reaching us, if you will, than 2,000-year-old or 3,500-year-old documents translated out of one language into another, and handed down to us over millennia versus a bit more of a direct interaction. And these are valid arguments to me. These are good arguments that do affect an atheist's or a theist's view, or somebody who may be agnostic or who isn't sure is trying to make their decision. These are relevant concerns. But the fact that somebody thinks that physics demands an explanation that's metaphysical, essentially, that's outside it, I love that perspective. That's a thinking person's way of going about figuring things out.
And indeed, one of the joys I have in studying the natural sciences is that I learn a little bit about what God has done. And in the process, I think I come to understand a little bit of what he is like. He is much bigger, much grander, much more awesome, much more majestic than I would have previously imagined.
See, science, it provides a set of tools that are useful for investigating phenomena in the natural world. But as powerful as it may be for dissecting planetary motion and battling cancer, it's not really intended for questions like, why did life forms originate in the first place? And we're free to speculate, opine, and have our beliefs, but science is not equipped to answer questions like this. This doesn't itself mean, let me be clear here, that there is an answer somewhere else. It just means that we have to be faithful to what science is, and that we can't extend the purview of science beyond what it is capable of addressing.
The Lord led me to genetics, and I don't have time to get into that story, but it's a fascinating story, how he led me to genetics. It was not what I had planned to do, but my goodness, I'm so happy I did. I can't imagine myself doing anything else. But I see it all as part of his plan
so cool.
to lead me to that and to help me to see identity in a whole different way. And when I think about my own identity, I think of Christ and how he created us. He created us in his image, so we had identity with him. And then we sinned, and his grace, we talk about grace, through his grace, he wanted to bring us back in relationship with him and to bring us back in identity with him.
Well, and I've certainly heard some of these arguments before, and the fact that, well-known and well-learned academics and practitioners of their respective fields are going outside the box and saying, hey, this is my argument, that why. And I love that they do that. Now, as far as then you get into the theological realm where you're saying, well, Jesus and the texts, then you're on different footing as far as, well, are the texts consistent? Who wrote them? How reliable do I or each of us consider them to be, and all that? And then those are different arguments. Same logic. When we're looking for evidence, we use the same logic, whether we're applying it in science or whether we're applying it in theology or sociology or some other thing. Now, in science, we consider things to be more falsifiable or verifiable or more trustworthy. The more we can duplicate things, the more we observe them in a laboratory, and we say, well, there's a physical law here. It seems to be in place that if X happens every time Y happened, then every single time, then there appears to be some sort of law to follow. And metaphysicians or theists would say, hey, there's a bigger question here, where maybe we're seeing the face of God a little bit more clearly. Maybe it's painting in how he, she, it thinks. But when you rely upon one set of texts, then it turns into, well, you just happen to have been born in a country that is predominantly Muslim or predominantly Catholic or predominantly Protestant or predominantly Buddhist. And so it's still nothing of the sort of a consistency there. And people in science are looking for that consistency. So if this just happens randomly over here, that you're espousing Christ or you're espousing Buddha or you're espousing pantheism or what have you, and that's just a product of where your mother and father had sex and gave birth to you, fair enough question. You might just come up with, look, I don't know, I can't explain it all, I still believe it. And that's fair. You can't gainsay somebody saying, I believe it. The problem is on an epistemological and a linguistic level when you say, I know this is true. It's objectively true. It's like, no, you believe something to be true, but to say it's objective, that's outside the purview for most intents and purposes of human capacity. But I love the way they presented what they presented. By and large, most of them, I really like how they presented it. I have no problem when somebody believes in God. None. I like when people are kind, nice, thoughtful, have good basis for what they believe. If you're going to tell me that I'm wrong simply because I believe differently, then I'm going to say, well, adios, because I won't tell you you're wrong. I can say it's not convincing to me, but I'll respect that you've got reasons for believing what you believe. So there it is, guys. Leave your comments, subscribe if you haven't, and we'll go from there. Have a great day. See you on another video, and keep thinking.